a spot of tea. Hit that share button, invite a friend, have a seat, cross your ankles, because our guest is none other than Zen Master Koshin Paley Ellison, author and Union psychiatrist. Welcome, Koshin.
Thank you so much. A delight to be with you.
It's an absolute pleasure having you. How have you been?
Very well, and delighted to be with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It is such an honor and such a pleasure to be with you again.
Mm.
And just your voice alone has brought me. It's such an honor. So, Koshin, one of the things you've done that is absolutely my favorite before we do anything else, I want to share this with everybody else because it's one of those things that we must all have and experience. And it's your book, Wholehearted. Slow down, help out, wake up. That has been such a pleasure for me. I have enjoyed that book, and I want to share that with my friends. And I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, and help us get through this period of time, which is like none other.
Yeah, it's a wild ride, as they say, and I'm delighted to be here. And I feel like one of the big medicines for this time is really learning how to show up for one another, and which also means to really show up in ourselves. And what I mean by that is often the really understanding, people say, well, what is Zen? And I said, well, it means sitting, to sit with oneself. And so in Zen, we have this posture of sitting where we are very rooted in the ground. We open our shoulders up, we feel the length of our spine, and then we bring our breath down into our belly, about 2 inches below our belly button, and just allow that area to be soft. And so that's an amazing way to be in the world, to be soft, upright, and open. And for me to be able to be in this time with those qualities feel like such good medicine. And when I'm able to do that and remember, a big practice in that is popular in these times is called mindfulness, but it comes from this term from called sati, which means remembering. So to me, it's more helpful in a way than mindfulness. It's often translated as mindfulness. And how do we remember how to be together? How do I remember to be soft? Remember to be open and to not be good at it, because no one I know is good at it, but we're willing to remember and return to this. And so to me, it's, to be in this space and that soft, upright, and open space is a great way to be with you, Natalie.
That is so poignant. One of the things we say here at the Whole Woman is we remind people we're human beings,
Mm.
and it's our being that is critical, not our doing. This time has caused us to have to be, and what you have just said is such a critical thing. It's not mindfulness, it's remembering because it's who
Mhm.
we are at our core.
Mhm.
Wow.
And for me, it's always what's actually nourishing. Like sometimes we do things, we grab for things that we think will make us feel better, but it's often just following our distractions, which actually don't always really soothe us, don't really nourish us. And so to me, these qualities of returning to and remembering to, like, and we'll fall down and we can get back up into them, is an amazing way to be in this time. And then we could actually support each other, like, oh, let's take a moment together and just focus on the exhale for a minute from our belly. Whoa, because I feel overwhelmed or anxious or scared or out of control. Yeah.
That feeling of fear oftentimes drives other reactions out of us, and then we show up less than our best selves
Mm-hmm.
because instead of saying, I'm fearful, um, we try to mask it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, were you always this zen?
um, Definitely not, and I don't think throughout the day I'm always this zen, but I think mostly I am. And I grew up in, I come from an immigrant family, and my grandparents had, and their parents had escaped the pogroms of Eastern Europe, and most of my extended family beyond the great grandparents were all murdered. And
Mm.
so I come from that kind of background, and which was not uncommon for that time. And so they were immigrants here and learning the language, and also feeling cut off from their lineage, where they were forced to move and, to save their lives. And, as is common with a lot of, ancestries where people were forced to move or didn't have a choice to move. And there's lots of trauma, and so I certainly grew up with my share of that. And it kind of passes down, as we know now, from generation to generation until
Mm.
we stop, you know, until one of us stops and, gets a hold and turns around and say, how can I do this differently? And so I grew up in a house with lots of Mm, sexual violence and physical violence and verbal violence, and at the same time, with lots of amazing people, very bright and successful people, but they also didn't know so well how to um, show up for one another. And so, kind of, people were forced to kind of go it alone.
Mm.
And so each person was kind of trying to make do with what they could. And and so I did that too. And when I was a little kid, there was so much chaos and so scary, and I was afraid a lot of the time, and I was also just drawn to the trees. I was really drawn to, I would just lay in the backyard and look up at we had this big oak tree in our backyard, one tree, but it was just amazing tree. And when I was 8 years old, I used to love visiting my grandfather, my grandpa George, and he used to save all these National Geographics. Back in the day, there were actual magazines, and they used to still, when I was growing up, there were lost native tribes still, and it was more unusual where they would actually profile a city or an urban environment. And this one where we were like on the floor looking through this magazine, and he loved doing that with me. And there was a photo spread of Tokyo, and there was this photograph of this monk, and he was wearing an Arigasa hat, which is this big round hat where you can't see the person's eyes, except you could see he was smiling. And all the people in the photograph were blurry. They were business people, and they were in suits, and he was there in his formal Zen robes. And I remember feeling, whoa, like just drawn into the picture so much, and wanting to know about this. He looked like a superhero to me. And I remember reading at the bottom, Zen Buddhist monk in Tokyo. And I thought, I want to be that when I grow
At 8 years old.
up. I remember coming home from my grandfather's house and my mom somehow asking me, like, what I want to grow up. be when I grow up? And I said, a Zen Buddhist monk. And she was like, okay, and so it goes.
Wow, at 8 years. So tell us a little bit about the journey through from that moment to when you actually became a monk.
Yeah. I was, a lot of trouble at home. And then, I was a young gay kid, and which, middle school and high school is not so friendly. The kids are not so friendly to
Right.
different kinds of kids. And so not fun. And and it was also this time where like the first Star Wars movie came out, and then this movie called The Karate Kid, the original one, and those movies somehow captured my imagination about how you could have a teacher. I never understood that, not like a teacher in school, but someone who could teach you about how to be in the world. And I thought, I would love that. And so we lived in a suburban area, where there were strip malls. And at the local strip mall, there was behind the strip mall in the basement was a karate school. And I went there, and I think I was 11 or 12, and the Washin-Ryu Karate School. And when I went down there was this guy named Sensei White, and he was very strict. And it was like this very moldy, kind of like not very nice place. It was kind of like going into the swamps, of the world. And we would sit on these wood floors, and we'd sit in seiza, which is like when you have your legs underneath you and you're just sitting upright. And it was so painful. And he said, you'll never be free until you learn how to be still and go through the pain. And we would sit like that for 20 minutes, sweating, sweating, sweating. And I really felt like it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I was totally hooked. I felt like I was, again, learning that kind of superhero power, that I could sit through what I felt like I couldn't.
Wow.
And I became totally dedicated to that practice. And so it became a refuge for me, this like strange underground karate school. And I was like this little kid, basically an 11-year-old kid, and this where most of the people were adults, and it was not like a kid karate school. And and I felt so moved, and I started even like teaching myself some Japanese words and getting really interested in Japanese culture. And it was not until when I was 17, I hitchhiked out to Boulder, Colorado, because I heard that there was a Buddhist university there. And I thought, I don't even know what that is, but I want to go to a Buddhist university. And I was reading things like Jack Kerouac and all these writers who were pretty unconventional, and really excited. So I hitchhiked out to Boulder, and when I got off the bus on Arapahoe Avenue to go to this Buddhist school, they had a writing program for the summer. And I didn't really even know how I was going to go there or how it was going to work, but it just decided to go. And but coming down the sidewalk was this, Italian guy like smoking a cigarette in these robes. And I thought, I had never seen a Western person in these kind of robes that I saw when I was a kid. And it was just like almost like everything came together. And it was an amazing moment. And his name was John Didal Lurie. And he was my first Zen teacher and that I had ever met. And that when I was 17, and I felt like that's when I kind of tilted deeply into practice, where maybe I was just fooling around when I was 11, but
Now, what did your parents have to say about you hitchhiking cross country?
oh, they didn't know, of course. They didn't know. I told them I was taking a train. Yeah.
Oh my God. But they knew you were going to Colorado.
Yeah, they knew I was going to Colorado, yeah.
Oh,
But they I think they gave me money for a train ticket or a bus ticket or something, but I was sure that that was not the real way to go.
so you get your first teaching as a Buddhist monk at 17. Fast forward today. Tell us about your Zen center, where you're located, because I haven't quite told our viewers yet where you're located. And I think it's quite a juxtaposition. Tell us about your Zen center.
Yeah. So our center is located in Chelsea, which is uh, around 20, we're on 23rd Street and between 6th and 7th Avenue in the little island of Manhattan. And we chose Chelsea because it's actually a very central location because we have a lot of people who come in from, you know, pre-COVID would come in from New Jersey or from Connecticut or Westchester or Brooklyn and Queens, and it's very central and easy to get to. And the Zen Center we founded, the real founder of the Zen Center is my grandma Mimi, who was this, you know, daughter of immigrants, Hungarian Jewish. She was like 4'10", you know, like she was tiny. She was a tiny woman. And when she started to, after her husband died, after my grandfather died, you know, her kids who were very loving and they wanted her to move to either Atlanta or to Syracuse to be closer to them. And she said, you know, I don't want to leave my beauty parlor. I don't want to leave my people, you know, and her local people, the local diner, the local, all of it. She's like, that's what makes my life my life. And so she asked me to take care of her and that she would take care of me. And it was actually the first relationship I feel like there was this conscious decision. You know, there's this form of love that the Greeks talk about where it's this deep, committed love. And I feel like that's what I began to experience with her. We made this decision to really show up for each other. And so I was with her through, you know, doctor's visits to ambulance rides to moving in with her into the hospice. And yeah, and it was, you know, living with her in the hospice that one of the last days before she died, she woke me up and said, you know, she was crying and she said, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I said, what are you sorry about? And she said, I didn't love you fully.
Oh,
And I said, what do you mean by that? Because actually, I had never felt more loved by anyone in my life. And she said, you know, there's this thing, the Zen thing, that always kind of disturbed her. She's like, I never understood it. And I realized that a part of me withdrew from you and
mm,
didn't fully love you because I felt that I didn't understand it. I felt
mm,
weird and like, what is that? And what's that all about? And she said, but I realize now that it's what makes you you. And she's like, and I'm so sorry that I didn't see that. And like, so a little part of me contracted away from you because I didn't understand it. And the funny thing is, she said, is that the Zen thing is actually what brings me so much joy now, which I never understood because it's your folks from your Zen center who can really show up for me. And I don't feel like they're distracted. They're just here in a really ordinary and loving way.
mm.
And so she said, I never thought I'd say this, but there's something to the Zen thing. And you and Chodo is my partner then and husband now. And she said, you know, the two of you should found some kind of nonprofit organization where you teach people about the Zen and you teach people how to care for themselves and others.
Wow. Well, thank you, Grandma Mimi.
I know. She's amazing. And we were like, that's a fantastic idea. And
Yeah.
so it was really her idea, which is so amazing. And so, it's so amazing that the real founder of the Zen Center is not us, but it's really her legacy, Mimi Schwartz, this little tiny Jewish Hungarian immigrant. Who knew?
Who knew? I see our viewers are really responding to your story, and we so appreciate that. Keep the comments and the questions and the heartwarm coming, guys. Um, Koshin, tell us about your work with the Mount Sinai at the Mount Sinai Hospital, or rather, should I say practice? Because I think for you it's more of a practice than work. And yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so we worked there for many years, and so I was on the ethics committee and the head of spiritual care for the palliative care department, and we worked there for about 10 years, and we still are affiliated with them. And what we were doing is to showing up for the staff and for the patients and their loved ones. So providing this extra layer of spiritual and emotional support to anyone who needs it. And for us, kind of like the whole woman, like we feel like it's the whole situation that needs care. It's not like I need self care and then I'm going to give care to you. It's not this kind of one direction situation, but how do we learn how to care for everybody? So, whoever you see in the elevator is who you're in relationship with.
Mm.
And so we did a lot of amazing work there, and we continue to have a wonderful relationship with our students now who are on the palliative care inpatient unit at Mount Sinai. So it's been a long, wonderful relationship.
You know, you said something just now that really caught my attention. The person you're on the elevator with is the person you're in relationship now.
Hmm.
That's profound because we're pretty much conditioned to get on the elevator, avert our eyes, and hope to avoid the person who's standing less than 3 feet away from us, sometimes standing inches away from us,
Hmm.
but we're in relationship with them.
Hmm. Well, I think of, sometimes our Zen students talk about this amazing question. They're like, well, how's my practice going? How is my Zen practice going? And I say, usually I ask, well, tell me about your relationships with the people you live near. And they usually say, what? What are you talking about? And I say, do you live in an apartment or live in a house? And, how do you, what do you know about your neighbors? And who do you know at your local supermarket? And how do you participate with the people that you interact with on a fairly regular basis at the bank and at the post office or wherever you normally go, dry cleaners, and learning? And they're usually so surprised, like, what are you even asking that about? I'm asking about my spiritual life.
Mm.
And they're so surprised. But I feel like in many ways, there's a wonderful uh, monk from Japan from around the 15th century where he said, the depth of your spiritual practice is shown by how you're serving others. And so for me, it's a really wonderful barometer, in particular in this time of COVID-19, where like, how are you showing up for people? How do we, like that's what I meant really by that elevator thing. It's just about like, how are we showing up? And are you reaching out to the people that you care for?
Mm.
How are you doing that?
Koshin, I want to talk about something that you blessed me with, which is this book, Wholehearted. And
Mm,
there's so much to talk about here, but I want to acknowledge the time. It's 6:26. We're usually done at 6:30. I am in no hurry if you have the luxury of sparing a few extra minutes with us. And I think our viewers would appreciate hearing more from you.
sure.
Um, but I would love for you to share with us about Wholehearted. And
Mm,
it's never been more apropos. We don't have a choice. We had to slow down. As a matter of fact, many of us stopped.
mm-hmm.
Help out and wake up.
Yeah, so it was a book that I felt like I had to write, and I feel like that's a usually a good reason to write it. In fact, I did I felt like I had to write it, but I actually felt like there were other things I needed to attend to that were more important until, a publisher came to me and said, please, what we want to have this book from you. And so then I said, okay. And what for me, the book is called Wholehearted because I feel like it's about how we can live in this life. And I feel like that's what's coming up for many people in this time, like really assessing where they are in their life and how are they actually matching their values with how they're actually functioning. And so the book is really about that. And I share lots of my own personal struggles and difficulties, because I feel like that the beauty of this life is that we can share with one another our struggles and our difficulties. And so that we realize that we're in this together and how we show up together is everything. And and to me, that's the great joy of life, to show up. And so, yeah, so the subtitle is Slow Down, like really coming into that, that posture of openness, the softness and uprightness, and then to help out, to see how we can serve. And that's how we wake up. You
Mm.
know, many of us just like want to wake up, or we want to like be enlightened or be at one with everything. But that only happens through the engagement, in my experience, with what is most meaningful and most real.
The what is when I think of your the care that you provide
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of life,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that you find we truly care about the most when we have come to the end of this journey called life here on earth?
Yeah, what I remember so often is that it's really about how we show up. And people have regrets because they didn't show up in their life. And to me, it's a kind of a beautiful way to close, maybe, to like really the dying people keep teaching me is that we have to be willing to use our life fully and to not hold back from loving well, from saying I'm sorry, to thanking people and having that kind of intimacy. Yeah, which is always available. That's the amazing thing. Always available.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think, if I may, one last um, one last thought I have, because I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this period of COVID-19, where we've been forced to quarantine and we have reduced our human contact so much, that there is a high incidence of depression,
Mm-hmm.
people just feeling lost, forlorn. I spoke yesterday to a colleague who recently relocated, actually migrated here to the US from another country,
Mhm.
uprooted their family, come to America, and within 2 weeks of arrival,
Mhm.
life is quarantined. So they
Mhm.
have no job, no friends, nothing. Everything is new, and
Mhm.
it's starting to take a toll
Mhm.
on them, wondering, did I make the right decision? And all the questions we ask ourselves. How do we
Mhm.
mm, cope, thrive?
We have to reach out, you know. I feel like your friend or this person, you know, each of us have to learn how to reach out. You know, there are so many, we also live in a time where we have to do something new, and learning how to do something new, reach out. You know, there's so many groups. There's prayer, there's meditation, there are support groups all online and available. So many of them are free, you know, to reach out and say, like, oh, I don't feel like it. But, like, who cares if you don't feel like it? Just do it. You know, sometimes our fears are not, or as the wonderful poet Hafiz says, you know, fear is the cheapest room in the house.
Ooh,
Oh, how I wish for you to have better living conditions. So to, and you could only write that if he knew what it was to be in fear. So how do we extend out? Is everything to leave the little room of fear and explore the rest of the house.
well, and that's why you're the Zen master.
It's a joy to be with you.
It has been an absolute honor and pleasure. I am so delighted, humbled, and refreshed to talk with you. It's always a pleasure.
Be well, be well.
You too, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I hope you have been as enriched and refreshed as I have been. I will encourage you to go out and get this book. It's available online. Don't even wait for it to be delivered. The Zen Center is New York Zen Center. Yes, it's in Manhattan. And yes, there is stillness and peace happening in Manhattan, in the city that never sleeps. I'm Natalie McKenzie, and I am the whole woman. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to share, enough love to give. I wish you enough. Good night.